Werewolf the Apocalypse. Let's talk Frenzy. So, Frenzy is, you know, exactly what it sounds like. You lose all control, or a guru, a werewolf, loses all controls and goes a little bonkers. So let's talk about the mechanics, some of which I am going to be using in my games and some of which I definitely won't be. Um, a frenzy comes about when you make a rage roll, or it can come about when you make a rage roll, and it's exactly what it sounds like. You roll your rage. So if your character or if the guru in question has 3 points of permanent rage, you roll 3 dice. If they have five, five, etc., etc. Basically, the idea is if you get four or more successes on your rage roll, then you are in frenzy. If you get six or more, you're in a special frenzy called Enthrall of the Worm, and we'll go over those in just a bit. Um, So you can have your players roll their rage anytime, like I said, any kind of intensely emotional experience happens. Um, Now you can only frenzy if you get four or more. So does that mean that characters that don't have at least four rage can never frenzy? Actually, no. You can actually, for particularly aggravating situations or particularly upsetting situations, you can give your characters or you can give your guru more rage temporarily, very specifically for the purposes of the rage roll. Now, for me, I would probably also let them keep that for the duration of the scene, um, because that just seems kind of fair, high risk, high reward kind of stuff. But let's get specifics. So the difficulty is supposed to depend on the phase of the moon. Um, New moon is 8 points, or is a difficulty of 8. Crescent moon is difficulty of 7. Half moon is difficulty of 6. Gibbous moon 5. Full moon 4. And if you're not familiar with Werewolf the Apocalypse and the difficulty thing, basically what that means is that anytime you roll your 10-sided dice, if the difficulty is 8, any dice that is 8 or higher is considered a success. And, and down the line, 7, 6, 5, 4. So obviously when a full moon, and you only have to roll a 4 to get a success, that's when you're at the most risk of losing control of the beast within, so to speak. I will probably ditch this rule and just set a flat difficulty of 6, because I don't want to have to keep track of the moon phase as my players are playing. That just seems like a chore that I don't want to deal with. If you do want to deal with it, one other caveat. You reduce the difficulty by 1 if the moon phase matches the character's auspice phase. So if you're a Ragabash, which is under the, you're born under the new moon, then you would, instead of the difficulty being 8, it would be 7. If you're an Alrune and it's a full moon, instead of the difficulty being 4, it would be 3. So you could have some fun gameplay with that if you don't mind, dealing with the whole lunar phase and keeping track of it as your players play. Also, you subtract 1 from the difficulty if your guru is already in Krynos form. For your normal frenzies, your 4 successes are if you've got 4 or 5 successes, your normal frenzy, you can spend a willpower point to halt the frenzy, but you lose any other actions you might take that turn. When you're in your normal frenzy, there's actually 2 different types. There's your Berserk Frenzy, and there's your Fox Frenzy. So, with your Berserk Frenzy, and you get to choose. So your players can choose, I'm going to Fox Frenzy, I'm going to Berserk Frenzy. Or, if you really feel like, you want to interject yourself, I guess you could decide that as well. For example, if your character has a very specific fear, and they're, I could see where you would make them Fox Frenzy as opposed to Berserk Frenzy, but that's... or maybe you make them roll for it. There's some different ways you could handle that. The Berserk Frenzy, your Guru immediately shifts to Krynos or Hispo, the giant war form or the dire wolf, and you attack something. Now there's some caveats in here. Usually it's you attack whatever it is that caused the frenzy. This makes good sense, right? However, if your permanent rage exceeds your permanent gnosis, you literally go after anything that moves. You don't see friend or foe anymore. You just attack everything. Um, if your gnosis is higher than your permanent rage, or your permanent gnosis is higher than your permanent rage, then you only attack the bad things. Um, unless you're in thrall of the worm, and we'll get to that in a minute. The only thing that is basically you're not going to go after when you're berserking is when you are or the only thing you won't attack typically, again with the rage and gnosis question, keeping that gnosis rage bit in mind, the only thing you won't attack is your packmates, but everything else is kind of fair game. On the other side of the coin is the fox frenzy, and this is you do everything you can to escape. You take lupus form and you just get out of there. And you only attack things that get in your way. Now, personally, I'm totally fine with letting characters go into Krynos or even Hispo here as well. And you're getting out of there no matter what. And you will, if someone tries to stand between you and the exit, you will go through them. And it does say that in the book as well. You attack anything that gets in your way. But if you're going to attack anything that gets in your way, I'm thinking you're going to either Krynos or Hispo form to do that. You're probably not doing that from just, your generic wolf form. When you're in your berserk frenzy, you can't use any gifts. You can't use any special tactics or anything. It is, you are just going after the thing until it is dead. Or you're getting out of there and you're not using, it's literally you've lost your mind. You've lost your mind with rage. You've lost your mind with fear, terror, whatever. So there's no thought process here. It is just very basic tactics. I run at it, I claw it, I bite it, stuff like this. You can spend rage for extra actions, but you can't split dice pools. You can't use gifts, you can't step sideways, we already said all that. Now, here's something that's interesting. Frenzied werewolves do not feel pain, they do not, and they ignore all wound penalties. And you only come out of the frenzy once the triggering situation is over. You can roll willpower once you're removed from the situation to, with the difficulty being your rage, to escape the frenzy. If the roll fails, players can try again next turn with no increase in difficulty. The ignoring all wound penalties seems like it's worth remembering. That's kind of interesting. Enthrall of the Worm. Let's touch on that real fast. This is something I don't plan on using in my games. I'm actually not going to go over the details of what Enthrall of the Worm is. It does depend on your breed. Homids, lupus, and Meti or Metis, depending on how you want to pronounce that. They all experience that differently, but it gets really gruesome and dark in ways that I'm not comfortable with. So I'm going to leave that out of my games. Feel free to look in the rulebooks for more details. What I will probably do is if you get 6 or more successes, you cannot use a willpower to stop the frenzy. You can use a willpower and sacrifice all your actions for the turn to stop a frenzy normally. But if you get 6 or more successes, I'll probably just be like, nope, you are raging. There's nothing else you can do about it. Or you're frenzying. There's nothing else you can do about it. But yeah. Is there anything else that I wanted to cover? Oh, one of the most important things that I think is really neat. Werewolves in this state don't remember what happens to them during frenzy. And I think that's a really interesting thing. Because basically, what that says is that it creates some really interesting storytelling opportunities. Like your whole party wakes up in the middle of a trashed room with blood all over the place. No one has any memory of why. That could be a really interesting storytelling point, I think. Because, of course, the insinuation is something caused the whole pack to rage they cause them all to frenzy, and now no one has any idea what happened, which is honestly kind of cool. And you can do a lot of different things with the story as a storyteller with that because one, did they actually frenzy? They don't really know. That's the insinuation from what's all around them, but they don't actually know for sure that that's what happened. How new are your werewolves? Do they actually know enough about, you know, the werewolf life that they even know that frenzying and this is what happens? Um, I suspect most werewolves do, but if your players are brand new and they're level one, wolves and haven't been in the community long, they may not. Um, and so that becomes an interesting point of discussion as well. Um, and if they did really all group frenzy, why? What was it that caused that to happen? And so there's some interesting role playing things I think you can do with that whole bit where werewolves don't remember what happens after they frenzy. They don't remember what happened. So I think that's a really interesting sort of way to start a story. And I think that's all I'm going to say about this. All right. Happy gaming, fellow werewolves. Go out there, kick some warm butt.